So I have a lot of unpopular opinions when it comes to books, so I'm going to tell you the best of the best books that I read in 2024 and the worst of the worst books in 2024. Literally just wait until you hear what my worst read of January was. We are going to go through every month of 2024 and I'm going to show you the best of the best, the 5 and 6 star reads, and then the worst of the worst, my DNFs and books that I really thought were going to be 5 stars but were so disappointingly not that now I'm just irrationally angry about them. Let's talk about where my reading journey started at the beginning in 2024, my best read and my worst read. You are not ready for this. So we're gonna go with the worst read of each month first because I like to stir up a little drama and I wanna know what you guys think. So my worst read, my least favorite read of January of 2024 is going to be Powerless. This was just ultimately so overhyped to me. I feel like Powerless was sort of a mashup, watered down version of every single one of my favorite millennial like games and trials books, like Hunger Games, Red Queen, who's not quite millennial, but like Divergent, all of those big millennial vibes, which honestly could have been a really good thing. Like I could have been feeling reminiscent and I could have enjoyed it, but I do feel like the way that it was done was not very original. So not only did it feel reminiscent of books I had already read, it felt a little bit too predictable because it was too similar to books I had already read. Now, if we want to do pros and cons, what I liked about this book, that it was pretty fast paced and I did enjoy the banter between our two romantic interests. I liked Kai, I thought he was fine, there's nothing wrong with him. I didn't think he stood out as like one of my favorite book boyfriends. He was just sort of like your average romantic-y book boyfriend. So I liked the banter, I liked the fast pace, I liked the trials. However, I felt again like the trials were watered down. So while there were trials in here, they weren't very high stakes in my opinion. I like emotional damage. This was like surface level baby trials in my opinion. And if we're gonna do games and trials, we need to do games and trials right. Moving into my favorite read of January 2024, which is also probably slightly controversial because people have a lot of thoughts about this book. Nightbane by Alex Astor. So I read Lightlark like in December of 2023, and then I picked up with Nightbane immediately when it was available in January of 2024. Nightbane was basically everything I wanted from something like Powerless. The romance and the tension and the yearning and the like steam really hits just as good as or better than like a spicy book. Nightbane is the second book in the Lightlark series. This was a 5-star read for me. What I love about it, the Shadow Daddy. Grimm is one of the ultimate Shadow Daddy. Who did this to you for days? He will unalive an entire world, an entire nation if they look at his woman the wrong way, and we just love something about that. He's a little bit of a red flag. I love him. Also, the way that this book is laid out, the way that the story is told, Lightlark was sort of a games and trials version. Those were also sort of small, not super high stakes trials, so that wasn't my favorite part of the book. But that was the main theme of Lightlark, and then this one is more heavy on the romance, on time jumping, like we're going back and forth between hidden memories and present day, so you're having to piece the story together through forgotten memories. I love when everything comes full circle. I love when everything falls into place. I love it, and it hits me so much more emotionally when it's not a linear timeline. Also, if you read Lightlark and you're not sure about it, you should definitely try Nightbane before you make your final decision. My least favorite read of February 2024 is gonna have to be The Housemaid by Frieda McFadden. Now, The Housemaid was just horrific to me. I felt like the story was interesting and like it's obviously a short, fast-paced story. So was it entertaining? Yes. Do I regret reading it? No. However, I feel like the twist was so horrible and like, duh, of course that's the twist. Like, I can't stand that. If I'm gonna read a thriller or a mystery or something that is obviously going to have a twist in it, that twist better knock me out of my chair when I read it, and The Housemaid absolutely did not do that. It also felt like a story I had heard and read before. There is a book that's very similar to it. I can't remember what it is, but I was like, I've definitely read this before, and all around absolutely hated this book. Let's move on to my favorite book of the month of February 2024, which was One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. Now this 5-star read. This magic system, super easy to understand, but it's also beautiful and deep and like emotion invoking at the same time. It's not a surface level magic system, it's tarot cards. So instead of having to understand like a super weird, convoluted, like inner workings of someone's mind or like world system, magic system. This is just like if you have possession of a certain tarot card, you have the power that that tarot card represents. One of my favorite things about it is gothic, it's spooky, the atmosphere is very beautiful. I feel like the world was so artistically put together, and it's very tree based, so there's a lot of forest and tree elements and tree names and like town names. It's very thematic and witchy and spooky and like foggy, so it's just a whole vibe. Our FMC literally has a monster in her head, and I don't know if it's just me, but this monster was giving Tailipo. Like, it was literally like this girl had the Tailipo, but like a kind of hot version of the Tailipo inside her brain. It's like kind of taking over her body the more that she relies on it for help. So when she's in danger, when she needs to use powers, she calls on this monster that's within her, lets him take over, and every time she uses his help, he deteriorates more of like her soul. And I really kind of have no notes on this, and if you're looking to get into gothic fantasy or gothic fantasy romance, this is not super deep and complicated and like weird to read. So this is a great one to start if you're interested in gothic fantasy or gothic romantasy. March of 2024, my birthday month. Yes, we have an Aries in the house. My least favorite book is going to have to unfortunately be another Frieda McFadden book, which was The X. The X, what the heck were we doing with The X? That was like the worst piece of hot garbage I've ever read. It was complicated, it was weird, and again, the twist was just like, why? Hot garbage, would not recommend The X, that was terrible. Was it written by AI? Who knows? So my favorite book, it's actually a whole series that I read in March of 2024. That's going to be The 100, and this is based off of my favorite of all time CW show, not counting Vampire Diaries. The 100 is a dystopian CW show, and it's a little complicated with the books because the show was picked up before the first book was like even finished. So the show is very different from the books. So I decided to jump in and see if the books were as good as the show. So it turns out we can do a deep dive on this if you guys are interested in the differences between the 100 TV show and the books, because there are so many, it's nothing like the books. But the books are their own story. It's really different. You have a lot of different characters, and then the main characters that are in here have completely different storylines, and they also kind of look different. But The 100 is like a 5 or 6 star young adult dystopian sci-fi read. So this is basically a space station is up in space after the Earth has been ravaged by radiation, and they have now decided that the radiation potentially could have dissipated enough that maybe humans can come back and habitate the Earth again. So they send 100 criminal youths down to the Earth and just kind of test them as guinea pigs. So basically this is going to follow the group that is sent down, and they are sort of as teens having to restart like society and humanity. And it also turns out there were already people on the Earth who had survived the radiation when they get there. So it's a whole lot of drama, dystopian teen angst. This has everything, will check every box if as a millennial you liked things like Hunger Games, Divergent, The Maze Runner. You should watch the show because it's completely different, and then also you should read the books. Both of them are like 5-star TV, 5-star book series, would recommend. April of 2024, we've got 3 books because I had a tie on my favorite. So let's start out with the negative, get it right out of the way. I did not love A Fate Inked in Blood. And it's really weird. Let me break it down for you. When I was reading this, during the process, during the reading, I did like it. I was having fun. I haven't read a lot about like Norse mythology. I don't really know anything about it. It felt different than like the spicy period piece like Fae books that I've been reading, like ACOTAR. It was a completely different vibe. And it had an MMC in it who had a man bun and was basically like the Viking version of Cassian. So I was like, heck yes, I'm gonna eat this up. I did kind of ultimately eat this up, but at the end is really where it went downhill for me. Like once everything started coming together, once I started to see where things were going, once I realized that the characters weren't really developing, they were just consistently annoying me, and then the really awkward, weird, hard to picture spice scene, that really drove me over the edge. The spice in this, like it's not all about the spice, obviously, but it was so distracting and like hard to even visualize what was happening, which is like the whole point of spice, is to visualize what's happening. I was just like, what is going on? What is happening? This is not what I expected from this like Cassian giving man. I wanted like hands on the headboard, make me feel something spice, and this was just awkward and weird and like kind of not cute. The MMC, who I started out loving so much, was just sort of like a wet blanket who really needs to like stand up to his dad, and he's just like kind of giving weak. This isn't a bad book either. It was my least favorite of the month. I think when I initially first read it, I was kind of on a high. I had finished it. I was like, it's okay. I think I rated it 3.5, but this is one of those books that the longer I sit on it, the less I like it. Now, my most favorite read of April was tied between two books. I actually had a pretty banger month in April, so book one, let's just get it out of the way since we've already talked about the first one, was Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig. This is the second and final book in the Shepherd King duology, and these two books together were so beautiful. We wrapped up immaculately, we had emotional damage, we had two romances, sort of one in each book. I was just sitting on my couch crying like half happy, half sad tears, and I was just like, this is how I want to feel at the end of a book and at the end of a series. My second favorite book of April 2024 is going to be Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole, and I actually read the first two books. So I read Spark and Glow, and I kind of like them about equally. So maybe there are 3 books in the month of April, but this was a 5-star read. I didn't think it was going to be 5 stars, and it really pleasantly surprised me, which is kind of one of my favorite things. I love to be shocked and awed. This is sort of like for our ACOTAR girlies, for our maybe Cruel Prince girlies. It's for people who like that high fantasy sort of fae vibe. There are not fae in here, it's different. It's sort of like celestials, but it feels kind of similar to ACOTAR, but there's not as much like boring world building as there is in ACOTAR book 1. People either really like it like me, or they really don't like it, either because they don't like the world building and the story is not for them, or they really don't like the FMC DM. Now, we could do a whole breakdown on DM if the story and the Shadow Daddy who's in here and the world and the plot are all very good. I can overlook an annoying FMC. I don't really care. I also think DM is relatable. Like, if we're being honest, we're all really annoying. We're all kind of like DM, and I bet our inner monologues kind of sound like her inner monologues. So like, maybe we're offended by DM because we see ourselves in her and we kind of don't want that mirror turned around on us. This is one of the slowest, most excruciating romantic slow burns that I have read in a while, and I love a slow burn that makes me want to pull my hair out, which is what this is. The Shadow Daddy in here, the MMC, is going to literally be your favorite book boyfriend. If you like the book, you immediately are going to have a new favorite book boyfriend. May of 2024, we also have a tie in May. Like, when you see the books, you'll understand why I couldn't just pick one, and they are 2 different genres. So let's start with the fantasy. My first favorite book of May of 2024 was Restless Stars by Caroline Peckham and Susan Valenti. It's so heavy I can't even hold it like with one hand. Look how thick this is. It's the final book in the Zodiac Academy series. It wraps up this 9-book series. This was just like the epitome of bringing every single bit of emotional damage you got from the series of Zodiac Academy, tying it all together, having the emotional ending. Like, you don't know who's safe because these authors are so rude. Like, they could literally unalive all of your characters, but you would still thank them at the end of it somehow. I cried, I laughed, I felt the range of emotions, which we all know. That's all I want when I read, is to feel something. The Tie is a completely different genre. It's a contemporary young adult romance. Now, bear with me. I know if you're a fantasy girly, you're like, I don't want to hear about that. You will want to hear about Binding 13. Now, listen to this. This is a contemporary romance about a rugby player. If you had told me that, like, I didn't really know that when I started this book. If you had just told me that, I would have never picked it up. This is in the young adult section. It is a young adult book. It's got some quite like explicit material in here, and reading it as an adult, I was just as impacted. I felt like I loved it. I love reading about high school, honestly, but this didn't feel like immature, like stupid high school. This felt like a deep, dark, traumatic journey that happened to follow someone who was the age where they're in high school. This whole thing is just an emotional kind of like therapy journey. Like, it's crazy. The Who Did This to You in here hits just as good as maybe one that Daddy Grimm says. And it's kind of like reading the Irish version of Skins. So if you watched the UK TV show Skins, It's very similar. It's got similar vibes. It takes place like in the 2000s, I believe, like early 2000s or maybe late 90s. So it feels like my childhood. It's got funny banter, funny characters. I feel like you're not even gonna know who you love the best. But this 5-star read, absolutely recommend. All right, June 2025, my least favorite book, and I'm still irrationally angry over this. I DNF'd it. I didn't even finish it. It was A Broken Blade. I just don't love this. I didn't have a good time. I felt like I was falling asleep while I was reading it. I don't even know how to describe it. I just felt like it was the worst kind of mashup of like all of the other romantasy fae series. Sort of like Powerless was a watered down mashup of all of the like millennial games and trials with some added romance. This was like a watered down ACOTAR, Throne of Glass, like typical fae assassin like storyline. Like, it was a good idea, but it needed to be more individual, and I just didn't love it. I didn't finish it, and I do feel bad about it every time I talk about it because people love this series. It's like, I feel like this is an unpopular opinion. Now, my favorite book, surprisingly enough, was another fae romantasy series, but it was magical realism, so that's gonna be a story that takes place like in an existing world, like kind of our world that's familiar, but it's got magical elements and other species and like things in there. That was gonna be Rhapsodic by Laura Thalassa. It's got the fae bargain trope in it. We love bargaining with fae. Also, the MMC in here, people lose their mind over Desmond. Like, if you think you like Rhysand, if he's the first one you've met and he's the only one you've met since then, you have to meet Desmond. And it is spicy, and I just loved it. This is what I was looking for because it didn't feel like a repetitive, predictable fae romance. Laura Thalassa is literally a romantasy, spicy genius. Quicksilver by Callie Hart was my favorite read in July 2024. I am someone who appreciates good plot with a side of like immaculate spice that is worth it, which is what this is. This is not like spice right out the gate. This is not like super immediately focused on the romance. This is world building, this is plot, this is character development, and I get kind of mad when people complain about it. They're like, oh, I DNF'd it at 50%, it was just so boring. Is it boring, or do you just not have the capability to like do the literary work of reading about the world and about the characters before earning something like spice? Like, I feel like we also need to kind of look inward there. I appreciated the plot and the world building. It's not boring world building. It's just like not romance in the first half of the book. It's not just a romance. It's not what we read to like just get like spicy excited. And that is why I like it. Kingfisher is a complex, morally gray, dark, complicated guy who has something going on in his brain that literally makes him kind of crazy, and there's nothing I love more than a slightly psycho red flag MMC. He is what Xaden Ryerson wishes he could be, because Xaden does not have a funny or charismatic bone in his body. This man, this is the one. If you think you like Xaden, you have not met Kingfisher. My least favorite read of July 2024 is going to have to be This Spells Love. Now, this was something that was in my other book club that I'm in, so I didn't get to choose the book. I don't think I ever would have picked it up had it not been recommended for the book club. It was just not good. Like, it had really good potential. It had really good, like, the idea was really good. The story, however, was just not it, and it was too fast-paced. It was wrapped up too quickly. Everything sort of just worked out perfectly when it didn't make sense at all. It was crazy, and it was like parallel timelines, and I love parallel timelines. I love stuff like that. There was such potential to take that story and make it like deeper, and then like tie the two worlds together and tie the ending together so that it actually made like emotionally impacting sense. But it was just a very surface level, parallel, like what if scenario with your life, and it ultimately just didn't deliver. August of 2024, this is another one that literally makes me mad to talk about. Done and Dusted by Lila Sage was my least favorite book in August, and I really wanted my first Western romance to be a good experience, and I'm currently reading The Chestnut Springs, and it's way better. So it's not that I don't like romance, it's not that I don't like Western cowboy romance, it's just that I really didn't like this one, and it was not a good one to like dip my toe in with. It's like a fast burn. It's for people who are reading for the spice. It's for people who don't really care all that much about the plot. Like, the plot was very back burner. There was plot, but it was just, you know, I felt like it was a waste of my time. My favorite read of August 2024. Now this is one of my all-time favorite books and series ever. So August was a great month. That was Bewitched and Bespelled. I'm gonna show them as sort of like a unit because they're a series and I read them back to back almost as if they were one book. And this was like the funnest of fun times. So this is not like a literary work of art, like deep, high fantasy, emotional world. This is fun, and the MMC will make you fair roll. And then ultimately, you can't help yourself. You're gonna fall for him. You're gonna fall for this red flag man, and you're gonna become obsessed with him, especially when he takes out an entire building for the woman that he loves, and it is just like the hottest thing in the entire world. Memnon is Damon Salvatore and Silas wrapped up into one beautifully red flag, rude MMC. So this is amazing. It's dark academia, so it's sort of like, it takes place at a college that is a coven. So it's witches, it's like a witch college. It's got witchy vibes. It's got sort of like fall Halloween vibes. There's also werewolves, a past lives vibe, like a hidden memory vibe. And our FMC is super interesting. Her power as a witch actually feeds off of her memories. So every time she uses her witchy powers, she loses memories. So basically she loses a part of herself every time she does anything with her powers. All right, we're getting close to the end of the year. September was a banger. This was really hard for me to pick one, and I don't want to do tie books the whole year, so we're just gonna pick one favorite book. However, let's start with the worst book of September of 2024, which I actually feel really bad about because I chose it for my own book club and I absolutely hated it. I did not like this book. I did not like The Coven. It's so thin, which I think was my first mistake. I have realized I like substance, I like world building, I like things that make a story important. So The Coven was just surface level, weird enemies to lovers, like weird romance, weird spice. I felt kind of uncomfortable reading about the spice, and I can get behind a lot of things. However, this was just weird. The world was not built well. The magic system was so interesting, but we never heard anything about it. This was dark academia, but we never got to be in a classroom with anyone. This just pissed me off. The best book that I've read all year so far, which happened to be in September, 6-star read. I bet you know what it's gonna be. Anathema by Carrie Lake is a literal work of art. This was like One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns, but way darker, more witchy, more like romance and like shadow daddy vibes. This is sort of like a One Dark Window and Akatar Had a Baby. This was like high fantasy gothic romance, and it was beautiful, a work of art. It's also got the like spooky gothic foggy forest like witchy Halloween vibes, so this was a great one to read right before Halloween. I love it. I absolutely love it. We've got animals in here. We have a dragon in here named Ravox. I love a dragon character. And we have an MMC that like kind of has little shadow scorpions. So we've just got everything I love about this, like gothic, spooky, witchy vibes. This is for our emo girlies, a shadow fire daddy, fun animal friends that are also kind of like evil, fun animal friends, and we love them. You are literally missing out if you haven't read this book. All right, no one call me out for this, but I actually meant to switch one of my least favorites earlier on. So we're gonna put the least favorite book in here for October as something else, but I read it a little bit earlier and you're just gonna forget that you heard that. It's gonna be Heartless Hunter. Now this is another case similar to Powerless, where this was hyped up so much and it absolutely did not deliver. I felt like everyone tried to sell it on the fact that like the world building was not really prominent and it was easier to get into because there wasn't world building. And I felt like the lack of world building is what really took this down a couple stars for me because nothing felt impactful. And the whole time I was reading this, anytime a character did anything or anytime a plot point happened, I was saying to myself, but why? What was the reason? What's the point? I don't get it. I don't feel like any of this makes sense. I felt like the relationship was a train wreck. I was rooting for the wrong guy, and like not in the good way, as in like enemies to lovers. I was literally rooting for the wrong guy, and I don't like the MMC. I think he's annoying. I don't think that they are enemies to lovers at all, which is how this is advertised, and I just don't like being lied to. Should it be as hyped as it is? Like there's nothing wrong with reading this book and enjoying it and even loving it, but like, is it really the best of the best? Because I think no. And then my favorite book of October 2024 was Throne of the Fallen by Carrie Maniscalco. So this book is a spin-off of the Kingdom of the Wicked series. I think it's right behind me. It's like right It's like right there. This is gonna follow a character that was in the Kingdom of the Wicked series. I thought the slow burn was amazing, and you still get like spicy moments before, you know, the big moment. So I thought that was paced really well. This is a standalone. And before you come arguing with me and saying, oh, but there's a book 2 that came out. Yes, it is a series of interconnected standalones. This is one story, one romance with 2 main characters. Their story starts and ends in this book. The second one is a different set of characters in the same world. The romance and the main story plot start and end in that book. The MMC in here is kind of like different. He's not a shadow daddy, he's not a fae, he's actually like a demon prince, and he's the Prince of Envy. So his personality and the romance is very interesting. He's sort of like a bachelor type of guy who will literally never commit. And we're gonna see if our FMC can, like, you know, change his ways. November is going to be another slightly controversial month because the book that is my least favorite, now let me get it out of the way before everybody freaks out. I didn't hate it. It was, however, my least favorite thing that I read in November. So this is really gonna contradict the beginning of my video. Skyshade, which is the 3rd book in the Lightlark series, ultimately was a little disappointing. Now, was it disappointing enough that I won't continue the series? Absolutely not. I will continue a series into the ground before I decide that it's not worth it. It was nowhere near as bad as something like The Coven or like A Fate Inked in Blood. Like, I'm angry about those. I wasn't angry about this. However, it was kind of a hot mess. It's really giving how it started to feel in Twilight, where Bella was like, we're in book 3 and you know who Endgame is, like, you know, and as the reader, you know who you want it to be. It's obvious, but we're still stringing around this other guy, like letting him think that he has a chance. It's like that. It's getting to the point where everything just sort of doesn't quite make sense anymore, and our FMC starts to feel a little bit hateable. Grimm is still 10 out of 10 in this book. Romance is okay in this book. It's very frustrating, and I was like, I don't think I could sum up and like tell anyone what happened in this book in a cohesive, clear way. They would be like, what? I don't even think I could attempt. I don't think I could tell you what happened in here. I don't know. But this ultimately was just not the 5-star that I thought it was gonna be. Metal Slinger was one that everyone was telling me to read. They were like, I haven't read a 5-star like this in forever. I ended up fully loving it, and it will have you irate, wanting to throw the book, but in a good way, not in a bad way. You can see the book is very well taken care of. I didn't throw the book, but I really wanted to. So this was a 5-star read, action-packed. It reminded me of Never Keep, which is the new series by the Twisted Sisters. I will say I'm unsure about the MMC in here. I don't actually know if I'm fully into him. Is he endgame? Do I like him? I'm not quite sure. I am fully ready for book number 2. I can't wait. I need it in my hands immediately. This needs to be one that's on your TBR. There's actually some good news. I don't have a least favorite book in December, or at least not one that I disliked enough to call it my least favorite. I do have a favorite, but December was actually so far a pretty good month. So unless I read something in the next like week that is catastrophically horrible, I don't have a least favorite book of December. So congratulations to me. We're gonna move right into my favorite book of December, Reign of Shadows and Endings by Melissa K. Rorich. So good. Dark fantasy romance that's actually dark. Enemies to lovers, if we're even going that route, that are real enemies. Like, I actually don't even know. I don't know what the romance trope is going to be. It's so good. It's really thick, and I put off reading it literally until the end of the year because I thought that it was just gonna be too much and it was gonna take me a long time to read it. It's very thick, but it's so good that it won't take you forever to read it. You will fly through this, especially if you liked like ACOTAR and Crescent City. It reminds me of like a combination of both of those. And you also like something like Zodiac Academy, which is darker and it's more true enemies to lovers, and it has more like true dark elements in it, and something like Plated Prisoner series. You will absolutely like this. It's literally like the best of all worlds. Plated Prisoner, Zodiac Academy, ACOTAR, Crescent City. It just reminds me of Zodiac in the way that the relationships are panning out and the way that we're sort of going about those, because I'm super uncertain about all of the MMCs. I wouldn't say that it's like a bully romance or anything like that. It's not like that, but it's very weird. That's not it. but also I kind of like it and am into it. What is wrong with me? And that's what I want to feel. Those are the questions I want to be asking myself when I'm reading a book. So let me know what your top favorite book and least favorite book of 2024 was. I don't want to make you type out every book from every month, but pick one. Pick your most favorite, pick your least favorite, drop it below, let me know. And also, are you mad about my Powerless and Heartless Hunter takes? I would love to know. I would love to discuss. So let's talk about it, and I will see you next time.